3 or 4 years ago, I attended a conference in Denver. Deacon Tim actually went along with me, and at one point in the conference, there was a nun that was on stage. She was in her 70s, maybe 80s, and she described growing up, she was the only girl in her family. She had two older brothers, and she recounted on the fact that she always felt that she was loved, that she was wanted, even spoiled, because she was the only girl and her two brothers were significantly older than her. But she shared an experience that she had when she was 16 years old. Her mom was helping her to start the car as they were heading to her driver's ed, actually, as she turned 16. And they were there. The daughter, the nun, was in the driver's seat of the car, and her mom was standing outside with the driver car door open, coaching her, okay, turn the ignition on, and asked her then to put the car in gear so that she could feel what that feels like. And the car was idling fast. And so when she put it into gear, it kicked, and she got spooked. And so instead of pressing the brake as she intended, she pressed the accelerator instead. And the car went in reverse, and the door that was open dragged her mom down and pinned her chest from the door to the ground and dragged her mom maybe 10 or 15 feet. When the daughter finally got out of the car and went to her mom only said two words: "I'm dying." And she died. And when she was on stage, the nun, now 70, 80 years old, she said, "That day of the accident, I not only lost my mother, I also lost my father because he never recovered." And she said, "I also lost my two brothers who were so overcome with the shock of the event." She said they all lived together those years in the same house, but in like cold isolation. And she shared how she had so much shame from that, believing that it was all her fault, even though, of course, it was an accident. She believed that she was all alone growing up in that household. You can imagine those years. And she made an inner vow after that event. A 16-year-old girl, she made an inner vow that she wished that she was dead. Believed that even it was her brothers and her dad wanted her dead instead. Then she said something there that really struck me. She said, "I used my gifts to hide." She was really gifted socially. She was really good with relationships. And so she used relationships and her giftedness socially to cover up the shame. And she said it's what got her through most of her life. And because of that, like, nobody even knew about the shame that she had. No one knew really that she felt all alone, even though that she was this socialite, this great with relationships. Last week, we began to talk about wounds. Someone asked me after the homily at one of the masses and said, "Father Mark, what exactly are wounds?" Wounds are simply life experiences that we have that form ideas in us, but ideas that are not true. In other words, wounds whisper lies to us. They're not the perspective of God, but rather the enemy. So, for example, this happened, so I must be unlovable. And you create a vow oftentimes with the wound. You got the lie that's there, and a vow goes along, right? So this happened, I must be unlovable. The vow that you make is like, I'm gonna be perfect. I'm gonna achieve and succeed so as to gain that love. I believe the lie, I'm unlovable, so I'm gonna be perfect. Achieve, succeed. Or this happened, so I must be dirty or broken or worthless. Again, you make a vow oftentimes that's associated with that so as to try to combat it. And oftentimes those lies, whatever they are, they oftentimes create a dark narrative in us. And we can begin to start to live from that spot, even to think that's who we are, to form our like our identity around that. It's very common to have those wounds. We all do, actually. So with that, I invite you to take out your worship aid that you received when you came in this morning. I took advantage of the back side of it to put down 7 common wounds. And as one man last night at the end of Mass in the piazza, he held this up and said, I think he was 70 years old. He held this up and he said, Father Mark, if anybody says that they don't have one of these, they're lying. He's right. The wound of abandonment, right? Oftentimes what's associated with that, it could look like this, lies in our head of, I'm all alone. No one understands me. The wound of shame. I am bad, dirty, perverted. It's my fault. The wound of fear. If I trust, speak, or confront, I will be hurt again. Wound of powerlessness. I feel overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. It's a common narrative that goes through lies there, goes through the mind that we listen to. Rejection. I'm not loved or wanted. I have no value. Wound of hopelessness. It's never going to change. There's no hope. Or lastly, wound of confusion. I don't know what is happening to me. I do not matter. I am nothing. There's usually inner vows that we make then that are associated with these, from these spots of lies, these wounds. But as you look at that, as you look at that list, which one or two of those may be most prevalent in you? Lies that you tend to listen to, that run through. Maybe it's created a dark narrative. Jesus wants to restore this. He doesn't want us to be stuck in that dark narrative, that lie. Actually, he wants to restore it and create a new narrative, to rewrite it. We can't change the past, but he can rewrite the narrative, one that's grounded in truth. Which brings us to this week, because that's exactly what happened with Peter. Peter's restored. He needed to be restored because Peter was a wounded man. He had a dark narrative that was going through him because of something that happened. Of course, the big thing that happened with Peter is that he denied Jesus 3 times when the stakes were really high and the heat was on. You may say, well, what's the big deal? Deny Jesus. There's a line in Luke's gospel of when Peter denied Jesus 3 times before the cock crowed. Luke's gospel, the line says, and immediately while he was still speaking, the cock crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter went away and wept bitterly. You can see the mark that was left there at that moment in Peter. Peter's wound there, one of them, shame. I betrayed him. I'm a failure. It's all my fault. Game over. So what does Peter do? This is where our gospel today picked up. What does Peter do? He goes fishing. That is to say, Peter goes back to what he's good at. He goes back to what he knows so as to hide it, to cover it up. Just like that nun. And just like us, we all have our fishing that we do. We all have our fishing. And so the disciples are out. We hear in the gospel today, the disciples are out fishing. They're out there on the boat. They look into the shore, and John notices that Jesus is out on the shore. And he says, Peter, it's the Lord. Peter gets excited. He jumps off the boat into the water, swims to the shore, gets up as he's walking onto the shore. He sees Jesus standing next to what? A charcoal fire. But you may say, well, what's the big point about a charcoal fire? A charcoal fire is only mentioned one other time in the entire Bible. And it just so happened to be 3 chapters earlier where Peter, the text says, was being was keeping himself warm by a charcoal fire when he denied Jesus 3 times and the cock crowed. That charcoal fire was like a trigger for Peter. He probably got out of that water, saw Jesus, then saw the charcoal fire and was like, uh-oh, and wanted to get back into the water and swim back to the boat. But Jesus intentionally builds the fire. He intentionally builds it because he wants Peter to see the charcoal fire. Just like last week, he wanted to meet Thomas with the wounds. That's what Jesus does with Peter. Something needs to be resolved. A narrative, a dark narrative needs to be addressed. And Jesus goes straight to that spot so as to restore Peter. And he does it with a heart-to-heart conversation. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Peter, do you love me? 3 times, so as to, again, to get back to the heart of it, the 3 denials, back to that charcoal fire, back to that night. What charcoal fire in your life would Jesus bring you back to? What is your charcoal fire? It's not to bring you back to that charcoal fire to shame you or to have you try to be stuck and like to live in the past. No. But to heal you, to restore you. Like back to the nun. She mentioned how she carried the shame. It's all her fault. The vow in which she made, I wish that I was dead. To hide it all up with covering it up through her was relationships and socially. She mentioned how she eventually went on retreat. Not till she probably went on hundreds of retreats as a nun for all those years. But it wasn't until she was like 70, 75 years old. She went on a retreat, and in prayer, the Lord brought her back to that moment when she saw her mom laying down on that driveway floor next to the car. And then she was also on the floor, which didn't actually happen, but there she was. And as she was on the floor there with her mom, Jesus comes and walks up to her mom, picks up her mom from the ground, and holds her mom like a baby. And then in that spot, she has a heart-to-heart conversation with Jesus. And she noticed herself just wanting to tell him, Jesus, touch me. Open me up. And there in that spot, she was able to allow Jesus to touch her, to console her in that spot, to pour love into that spot. And she described that when that happened, when she was able to do that, she said it was as if arteries in her heart opened up and love and grace began to flow through them in a way that they hadn't since she was a 16-year-old girl. The lies that we listen to, the wounds in which we have and the vows that we make from those spots, restoration awaits you. Victory awaits you. Jesus has risen from the dead, and he's alive. And he can restore and create new narratives from dark narratives and lies that repeat in our head from wounds in which we have. He can break unholy vows that we've made because he's alive right now. He's risen from the dead. And he can rewrite parts of our stories. So I want you to take this home this week. Normally we print out just enough that when you leave, you drop it off. You know the drill. You drop it off in the basket so that the next mass can take them. We printed off more this week so that you can take these home. Don't drop it off in the basket. Take it home and pray with this list of 7 wounds. And as you pray with them, which one or two of them, it's like, yeah, that's what runs through my head. That's a lie that I'm susceptible to believing. It's the dark narrative that's there. And I hope that it just gives you permission. It gives you permission to go there with the Lord, to invite him there, and to speak to him about it, to have a heart-to-heart conversation with him. Don't go fishing, though. Don't go fishing. The temptation will be for you to go fishing. Some of us have been fishing for decades, where it's like we're really good. Some of us have like 10 poles in the water, and we're just running around on all 10 poles so as to not have that heart-to-heart conversation. Tell the Lord which one. Let him tell you the truth of your identity. Maybe for some of us, it's just simply, you're my beloved daughter, my beloved son. Some of us, it's, you're worthy of love. Some of us, it's, your past mistakes don't define you. That's what it was for Peter. Some of us, it might simply just be, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. The goal is to facilitate a spiritual conversation, to have a heart-to-heart with Jesus. Don't go fishing, though. Don't cover it up. Let Jesus come to the charcoal fire that is in your life and have a heart-to-heart conversation with the risen Jesus so as to be set free, to have a new narrative, to be restored. That's what happened with Peter. That's what happened with the nun. And that's what can happen with you and with me.